Hello, I'm Ethan Chase, and a New York organization development coach, and I focus on individuals and organizations who are creating amazing cultures, doing amazingly ethical things, and achieving significant success by leaving a lasting legacy. And today I want to focus on a gentleman whose name has come up because he recently discovered that Donald Trump had claimed to fire him after he had already given up a 2-year stint as a ambassador, a humanitarian ambassador. So gentleman's name is Chef Jose Andres. Not sure if you heard about him, but I want to shine a spotlight on him today because of the work that he's done as a shining example of effective leadership that leads with a moral compass. Let's dive right in. Chef Jose Andres was born in Spain, moved to the US when he was 21 years old. He started in Washington, D.C., and he began volunteering in the D.C. Central Kitchen, a food kitchen, which is important because that was formative in terms of his value construct. He started to think about philanthropy even back then as a 20-something-year-old. So over the course of his career, which has spanned decades, he's been a chef, a restaurateur. He saw the role of cooks because of the power of food to be able to change the world. So it led him in 2010, so 15 years ago, to found an organization called World Central Kitchen after a devastating earthquake in Haiti with the support of his wife, Patricia, as well as his business partner, Rob Wilder, and his wife, Robin. So since then, he's pursued the mission to fulfill the words of John Steinbeck, wherever there's a fight, so that hungry people may eat, will be there. So this is the kind of individual that you want to be forming organizations. You want them to be the tip of the spear to lead initiatives in terms of causes and an amazing legacy of making the world a better place. So I want to share a little bit of a video about his philosophy about being a ambassador, a VIP brand ambassador of emergency responses. So I'm going to play a little bit of this video. So I just want to spotlight that's a driving force is the urgency of now, meaning people can't wait for governments to do their thing, to private organizations or individuals to decide to do the right thing. He felt compelled to create this to literally jump into the fray because there was a void, a gap in helping people in real life or death emergencies. So that driving force, again, to be there for the people when the emergency happens. Well, if you think about that, what you call contingency planning or risk management, um, but the notion of you may not be able to be aware of all the things that are going to happen as far as crises. anywhere in the world, for example, a global pandemic, but you're prepared immediately to act. Why? Because you've planned, you've prepared, you've identified what you need internally. And also experience is a great indicator. Earthquakes, tsunamis, wars. I discovered really, although he's been doing this for 15 years, I discovered Chef Andreas as I've been following on a daily basis the war in the Ukraine and what he's done for the people of Ukraine. So that to me is an exemplary statement about ethical leaders who are driven by a very strong philosophical value construct, and they understand that it's not making a profit, right? I say this all the time. We're at a culture war in terms of what's the purpose of business, where over the last 50 years, the purpose has been maximizing shareholder value. And now we've coming back to before 50 years ago, before the Peter Drucker era began, we actually, to start a business, you had to prove a societal value to the organization existed. Well, we're kind of coming back to that. So I want to talk a little bit about this notion of leadership food for thought from Jose Andreas. So you don't have to be a foodie to learn valuable leadership lessons from Chef Jose Andreas. If there's such a thing as a typical celebrity chef, he isn't it. He's internationally recognized culinary pioneer. He's credited with popularizing a type of food called tapas, which are small Spanish dishes in the US. But this isn't why Time magazine has twice named him to the list of the 100 most influential people, or why he'll be a keynote speaker at the IHI Forum in 2020. What sets him apart from other renowned chefs is the work that he's done over the last 15 years with World Central Kitchen. The nonprofit he founded back in 2010 sets up field kitchens that feed people fresh meals, often within days of a major catastrophic event: earthquake, hurricane, fire, flood, tornado, war zone, or other calamity. Most recently, it's estimated that the World Central Kitchen has fed more than 16 million people around the world since the start of the COVID pandemic in 34 states in the United States alone. So providing much needed nourishment to people in dire need is praiseworthy, but Andreas goes further. His organization is challenging conventional disaster relief models by not only providing aid to those in need, but also empowering newly out-of-work restaurant workers from the pandemic, when all those restaurants and food service organizations shut down, to cook nutritious meals most familiar and appreciated in their communities where people are dealing with this. As Washingtonian magazine has said, the World Central Kitchen's efforts aren't just a feel-good achievement, but an actual innovation. And that gets back to my point about bona fide leadership, right? Doing good is in itself its own reward. And yet, those people who are driven by a strong moral compass, a pathological desire or need to do for others, the servant master syndrome, right? They're also looking out into the future, which enables them to, on par with other leaders, be more innovative. Always challenging the status quo as both a chef and a humanitarian has given Andreas a unique perspective on leadership. His many lessons on leadership that I really wanted to reinforce today for those who are watching who have an opportunity to lead is lead with empathy. Maybe coming from a family of healthcare providers, both his parents were nurses, taught Andreas to approach working with people with caring and compassion. He says, leadership, 51% empathy. If you don't show empathy, you can't lead. So a second takeaway from his experience, his life lessons: embrace continuous improvement. Andreas recognizes the need to keep honing his skills. He says, I've been a cook all my life, he says, but I'm still learning to be a good chef. I'm always learning new techniques and improving beyond my own knowledge, because there's always something new to learn and new horizons to discover. So in my consulting practice, I have to say, this is one of the major challenges I have to breaking through with management teams. They're not leaders. in the truest sense of the word. They manage, they control people as if they're assets, they dictate work to be done. That's management. Leaders are constantly looking inside themselves. What can I do differently? How can I be better? What have I not tried? And the responsibility is on them. You never hear a leader place blame or talk about other people. Just don't do that. But they're constantly looking to evolve. In other words, Carol Dweck's growth mindset or lifelong learner attributes. And by the way, these are the kinds of attributes you should be recruiting for in your talent acquisition. No leader makes a difference alone. Just think about that. How complicated is this? I don't know why more people in positions of power don't get this. You cannot be a leader unless you have followers, right? And it has nothing to do with the title on your business card. When one of his restaurants earned 2 Michelin stars, one is a phenomenal achievement, Andreas credited his team for the accolade. Both in his restaurants and in his humanitarian efforts, he surrounds himself with highly talented people. He says, "You're only as good as the team you have around you," he has said. Everybody says that. I found in my 16 years of coaching over 500 organizations, very few people walk the walk. Talk is cheap when it comes to leadership behavior. Now, I want to talk about something because I have 470 plus videos on my little YouTube channel. Nearly every one of them talks about culture and the need to empower your people. So don't listen to me. He says, Andreas, Chef Andreas, create a culture that empowers others. When World Central Kitchen was first developing, Andreas rejected a conventional org chart, that outdated 20th century command control structure that was strictly utilized and created solely for the purpose of industrial revolution manufacturing and bringing people from the farm to the workplace. I don't believe in traditional company structure because the best ideas don't always, or often, I might say, from the top. He believes a flattened matrix hierarchy encourages engagement. Flattened meaning fewer levels of middle management, fewer levels of administrative oversight. People are closer, top to bottom, in terms of project-driven teams. The best ideas do not always come from the top, he said. He believes a flat hierarchy encourages engagement, people to interact, and agile problem solving from the entire team. We need to be empowering people to be successful. And by the way, I'd be remiss if I didn't just chime in and talk about what abject stupidity it is for organizations like Meta, McDonald's, Harley Davidson, Lowe's, Walmart, et cetera, to do away with their DE&I initiatives. DE&I isn't reverse discrimination. DE&I isn't a hiring mandate. When implemented on a logical basis, diversity, equity, inclusion is building a highly diverse workforce that gives you a maximum amount of perspective, experience, which then maximizes your organization's ability to solve problems, be innovative, and apply creative, diverse background to the challenges your organization faces. Andreas has for years used his public prominence, his persona, his reputational brand to be an advocate for policies to address food insecurity, poverty, and immigration reform, and to denounce racism. He sees the systemic inequities highlighted by the COVID-19 crisis as yet further evidence of the need for change. Humanity, unfortunately, we forget quickly the good and the bad, he said recently, which we're finding ourselves all over again in 2025 on day 3 of the Trump administration of billionaires who are going after the rights and protections of most Americans. What I hope, says Andreas, I hope we will not forget is what we learned from the failures in this system, and that will give us the opportunity to fix it. As here we are, the Trump administration has just announced they are taking an interim step to firing all of the federal government's DE&I employees by putting them on paid leave. It's an interim step. It's just a legal stopgap before they get rid of all employees in DE&I. So Jose Andres, the man who created an army of culinary first responders. Before Chef Jose Andres became famous for World Central Kitchen, he had already scaled the heights of his profession. His new cookbook celebrates the group's humanitarian impact. I remember this Spanish guy screaming, said chef volunteer Carla Hoyos, describing the first time she met Chef Jose Andres. He had just come from a meeting with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and he was furious. And I thought, oh no, no, no. She shakes her head emphatically. I am not going to deal with this person. I don't care who he is. It was September 2017, shortly after Hoyos arrived in Puerto Rico following Hurricane Maria, the deadly storm that devastated the island, killing nearly 3,000 people, making most roads impassable, and knocking out 80% of the power grid. Several days earlier, Andreas had touched down with a team from his nonprofit World Central Kitchen, which he founded in 2010. The organization originally emphasized longer-term programs such as supporting nutritional training for young mothers. But after Hurricane Maria, its efforts now focused on deploying an army of culinary first responders to feed people during and after the world's worst disasters. By the way, I don't know if you remember Hurricane Maria, with Donald J. Trump standing there at a food distribution center, literally tossing paper towels to those people of shithole third world countries. Puerto Ricans are Americans. As Andreas absorbed the enormity of the challenge facing Puerto Rico, he began calling in troops, asking chef friends and others to pitch in. At the time, Puerto Rico was still under curfew, so the World Central Kitchen team was working from 4 until 8 p.m., and each day ended with a debrief led by Andreas at a hotel, one of only 2 that were open on the island. Hoyos recalls the questions he asked his people. How can we do better? How can we feed more people? Are we feeding them fruit, healthy food? A few days later, Andreas was due to deliver 5,000 meals to a town an hour away, but he told Hoyos to prepare an additional 1,000 sandwiches. When she pointed out that there were only 5,000 people in the entire town, making the extra food was unnecessary. To which he replied, what about the people I find on the way? Her initial fear that he would turn out to be yet another hot-headed chef quickly subsided. He thinks of everything, and he actually cares. And this is the lesson for leaders, okay? This is why I'm spotlighting this individual. Other than Donald J. Trump just recently on Truth Social announced that he was firing Chef Andreas, when Chef Andreas the week before, his 2-year term in the prior Biden administration as humanitarian leader was done. So Andreas went onto social media and goes, not really sure what he means by fired. I'm done. My term is over. To Andreas, this intensity is just part of his job description. He says, chefs and cooks have one of the greatest responsibilities in the world, he says. We touch everything: agriculture, labor, immigration, the environment, diplomacy, national security. If we're not using our voices to say something to help make the world a better place, why are we here? Why indeed? And that takes me to the end of today's video, where I ask a rhetorical question to those of you who are in leadership roles, you aspire to leadership, maybe you're in the process of a side hustle, you're launching a new initiative, just thinking about it. From the very beginning, in my work with over 5,000 entrepreneurs over the last 16 years, I can tell you a lot of entrepreneurs think about what they're doing to improve products, services, a niche or a lacking of an offering in the market. As you're doing that, thinking about very strategic business considerations, please add an additional thought. What is my legacy going to be on the last day on this earth? What do I want to look back over the course of my time doing this and have people say about me? What do I want to accomplish when all is said and done? Because again, when I go into an organization, I do an audit of its culture. The first 3 things I look at, first 3 things are your vision statement, Are you being honest to it? Does everybody understand it and buy into it? Your mission statement, how are you going to accomplish it? What do you do and who do you do it for? Are you living that? And lastly, your code of ethics, your code of guiding principles, your moral compass. Some would say your organizational values. What are they? And are you living them? This is Jose Andreas, a perfect classical example of leadership in action, a bona fide leader that we can take from today. So thanks so much for coming in and checking out the video. If you liked what I had to say and you want to support my efforts here, please subscribe. It helps me get out the word. If you like the video, hit the like button. And also, if you have any comments, please share them. And reach out to me if you know somebody like Chef Andreas who's doing amazing work that you would like me to shine a spotlight on. Or if you know somebody like that, why not reach out to me or have them reach out to me, and I'll bring them on my podcast, Chasing the Dream, to help them emphasize their organization. Thanks so much for taking time out to check out this video.